Hey everybody, it's time for another What If devotion. I know we've had a few days off, but we are back and better than ever and ready to continue our series on the What If devotion. And today's question is, what if some of the things happening in my life was God's way of redirecting me toward His purpose? You know, sometimes in life it feels like we hit brick walls, and sometimes that's just what happens. Other times it is God's way of stopping us from going in the wrong direction and trying to move us in the right direction. What if today we just chose to go in the direction that God was leading us to, understanding that those brick walls sometimes are God's way of stopping us from destruction or from getting far away from His will and from His plan for our lives? There's a great story about that in one of the prophets, and the prophet was Jonah. And we know the story by heart. But the thing is do we stop and see how some of that's happening in our own lives and how we are Jonah in our own lives at various times. Here's what the Bible tells us in Jonah chapter 1. It says that the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai. Get up, go to the great city of Nineveh, and preach against it, because their wickedness has confronted me. God's instruction was clear for Jonah. He said, get up and go to Nineveh. Jonah didn't want to do that. Jonah had other plans. And so it says in verse number 3, it says, however, Jonah got up to flee to Tarshish from the Lord's presence. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. He paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the Lord's presence. So here's what's happened so far. God has called Jonah and called him with a specific plan, a specific purpose, to a specific place. He said, I want you to go here with this message. And Jonah said, no, I'm not. The Lord had told him to go east. Jonah was going to go west. If the Lord said go north, he was going to go south. And if you look, there is this trajectory. And I've preached on this at our church before. There's a trajectory that happens in Jonah's life from that very moment. Everything starts going down. He goes down to Tarshish. He goes down into the boat, and he goes down into the water and down into the belly of a whale. What if today we could stop going down and start going up? Here's what happened. Because God loved Jonah, and because God was going to see His plan fulfilled, here's what happened. In verse number 4, it says, then the Lord hurled a violent wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose on the sea that the ship threatened to break apart. The sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his God. They threw the ship's cargo into the sea to lighten the load. Meanwhile, Jonah had gone down to the lowest part of the vessel and stretched out and fallen into a deep sleep. So what are we learning here? What do we see? Instead of just letting Jonah go, and instead of allowing Jonah to run away from this calling, God threw the storm to stop Jonah. And the thing was that Jonah was headed towards destruction. He was running away from the will of God. But sometimes, and the great thing about our God is that sometimes He will stop us from running. And there are things that may be happening in your life right now, and you're saying, I can't get ahead. I can't get ahead. I keep hitting brick wall after brick wall after brick wall. Some of that is patience. We got to be patient and wait for God's timing. But some of it is we are not going in the direction God has called us to go. And He's throwing something up there to stop us from destroying ourselves, to stop us from getting even further away from His will and His plan for our lives. So often we'll hear God speak and we'll say, nope, not me. Didn't hear it. That was kind of how Jonah was. He didn't like the call he had received. And he was like, I'm not doing that. You can pick somebody else. Let somebody else go. Here's the thing. There wasn't anybody else to go. God had chosen Jonah. So instead of running away from God, what if today we accepted His call and went wherever He called us to go? Instead of seeing some things as brick walls we're just going to hit our heads up against over and over and over again, how about seeing them as God's way of redirecting us and saving us from the destruction that could come if we get on the other side of that wall? When we begin to see God working in such a manner, we are seeing how he can redirect us and rearrange our lives to get it in line with his will. See, when our alignment's off, we start pulling to the right and to the left. The Lord's wanting to keep us straight down the middle. Jonah ran in the opposite direction. And even his intention, it seems kind of crazy to us, doesn't it? In verse number 3, it said he was going to flee from the Lord's presence. You're never going to get away from the Lord. He's everywhere. And so he thought getting to a new place and running in a different direction, that then he would be free from that duty that God had called him to. But you know what was going to happen? He was never going to find what he was looking for, running in the opposite direction. Same is the truth for us. We will never find what we're looking for when we run in opposition to the Lord's will for our lives. So what if today we took all those things, those barriers that we keep banging our heads against, and said, all right, God, are you trying to redirect me? Are you trying to move me closer to your will by telling me that's not the direction to go in? And start seeing things as God positioning us and repositioning us so that we can fulfill his call in our lives. You know, sometimes we all got Jonah inside of us. We know what God has called us to do. We know what God expects us to do, but it's not really what we want to do. But how great is it that God loves us enough to keep us from destroying ourselves and pulls us back to where we're called to be. May God bless you tonight. And I hope that you'll look at your life and say, okay, where is God trying to redirect me to right now in my life? And when you see that, and when you find that, and when he reveals that to you, go with where God is calling. Because in that, you're going to find fulfillment, peace, hope, and joy like never before, like nothing the world can offer. God bless you.